What town are you in again?
I'm in a town called Totnes, the Sedona of the UK,
It is?
maybe, along
Oh,
with Glastonbury, maybe.
yeah, really?
It's a town full of dynamic people doing lots of dynamic things, alternative art, healing. We have more therapists here per square mile, almost certainly, than anywhere else in Britain.
What's the population of Totnes?
Oh, it's only about 7,000. Small town.
Wow, it must be, sounds like a
Yeah, yeah.
great community.
It's a good place to live if you're vegetarian or you use alternative therapies or if
Yeah.
you're into art. There's a lot of great artists and musicians who live in the area, writers. It's a sort of mecca for people of alternative lifestyle.
We're talking with Roy Whenary. Have you ever wanted to
Yeah.
be a star in the world of non-duality, or because
No.
you're as good as anyone, just period. Forget about it. As far
Well,
as
of
the way
course.
you
Yeah.
express yourself.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's how I see it. I mean, I think everyone's equal. You start from an equal base. I mean, I even, the teachers that I ever, sort of was attracted to were people who you could just approach and you could speak openly with them, and they didn't assume any higher status or they didn't put themselves on a pedestal. And I think that's the only way it can be if you put someone on a pedestal. And it's demeaning, really. It's demeaning to the being that you are, and everyone is equal in my view. So
Who
some people know a lot more than others, but that's knowledge.
can you name names of people that you say you talk to?
The two that I've sort of been closest to, I suppose, were Vimla Thacker and Jean Klein. I've met a few others, but Jean was very approachable, a real gentleman. He never assumed anything. He was always very considerate and very, you felt there was a natural overflowing sort of compassion with him, and you could approach him without feeling like there was any barrier whatsoever. So
Yeah.
it's a good model to have, really. Jean used to often say that if you take yourself to be a teacher, you take yourself to be a student. You're kind of a bit wide of the mark. So even though he would sit on a stage and there may be a few hundred people in the audience, or a couple of hundred, or sometimes only 20 in a small group, also it didn't get in the way of his availability and his being able to kind of just walk up to him and talk to him. He was very approachable, and I think that's my preference.
Mm.
I don't think it's in a way in this day and age, it's like the old model has almost sort of fallen away. The great Indian mystic standing
Yeah.
firm in his high ideals and whatever. I mean, there's a few people who still market themselves like that. You get emails from them every so often. Big beard, Swami this and Swami that and whatever, but it's all is theatricals. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it's deeply steeped in tradition too. So
In a way that in the past particularly, and probably still in India and some people in the West, that actually someone presenting themselves like that may actually be the tool that cuts through their resistance to someone who they think is only just like them. Some people need to have a figure up there who they aspire to and they can look to as for advice and whatever it is. I think it depends on where you are within yourself, how easy you are in your own skin. If you're comfortable in your own skin, then I think you wouldn't put someone above you or below you.
we were mentioning Jean Klein, like how he would be marketed in today's world. I mean, not that he was marketed in his day, but in these
No,
days,
no,
would he have been marketed? Would he have been
no,
a commodity?
no. He wouldn't have let it happen. No, he wouldn't. No, he would have still carried on as he did. I mean, in those days there was hardly anyone. It was just him who came through. In England, there would be Jean Klein would come through London a couple of times a year for a number of years. But I can't think of anyone else who was doing that at that time. I mean, before him there was Vimla Thacker. Of course, Krishnamurti had been around for decades and decades before, but he had such a big following that it wasn't easy without feeling that you were kind of imposing on him to kind of approach him, because so many people, Krishnamurti's talk, so many people used to want to talk to him just to be close to him,
Yeah.
and you felt like let him have some space. So I never really approached Krishnamurti in that way, because I just felt like the poor fellow's being hassled by everyone.
So how did Eckhart Tolle become a commodity?
Who knows?
Who knows?
I think it's a different time, as you say. I mean, Jean Klein died same year as Papaji, I think, which was about 98, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things have changed since then. Non-duality's
Yeah.
taken off. I suppose a lot of it is to do with Eckhart Tolle, but there was a lot developing before Eckhart Tolle appeared on the scene, it seems. But I mean, I'm not a great fan of his writing, to be honest, but I do appreciate the work that he's done. I think because of his own suffering, which he's spoken about, depression and thinking of suicide and all the rest of it, he touched on a place within himself that a lot of people probably resonate with. I think there's a lot of depression in the world. There's a lot of people who feel lost and confused and whatever. And when someone suffered that and is also a writer and can express themselves clearly, when they write a book, it hits the mark straight away, because they put into words what everyone else is trying to put into words. Is trying to understand themselves. So I think it's because a lot of people have been to the place that he's been to, that he's particularly of interest. That's my feeling.
Yeah. Let's focus on feelings of depression then. And let's say a person is looking for something in non-duality, which is a pretty big term. You have any advice for them?
I don't know. The only advice I can offer, or I wouldn't call it advice, but a pointer, is look to the inner joy that is somewhere inside you. I assure you, it's there. It's there somewhere. Just be assured that it's there, and try and find a way to it and hook into it. Find out who you really are. I can't talk about what it feels like to be depressed, because I've never been depressed. I don't know if I'm a rare case or whatever, but I've always been happy. I've never felt depressed. There's always hope. There's always a new opportunity. It doesn't matter what happens to you. You can always step out of it. Find that place within yourself, that is still, that is not affected by what's happening in your so-called life, your personal life. So I think once you've actually found that, I suppose it's inner peace. Once you've found that, then nothing can hurt you in a way. Nothing can touch you. Doesn't matter what happens. The worst circumstances, you can always go back to that place, and you see what is happening on the surface as the play that it is, basically. But it's a different case if you have sort of traumatic experiences lodged in your past memory, which a lot of people have, and I know that a lot of people I know have this, and they spend a lot of the rest of their lives trying to actually unravel this sort of hurt, abusive relationships, parents who bully their children. So there's deep-rooted fear, or even if there's physical or sexual abuse or whatever, it does all sorts of things to the mind which sort of has to find strategies to be able to cope. So lodges these memories deep down where they don't have to be looked at so carefully. It's amazing. I don't know what the percentage would be if you did a survey, but I think it's probably at least 50-50 of people who carry this. That's my feeling. But I wouldn't purport to be an expert in dealing with people's depression. I can point them in the direction of possibly of inner peace or finding their inner joy. Also, I think that's saying that reminds me of something I remember. I remember the feeling of something that Jean Klein said once, that about putting a positive affirmation out there. It wasn't something that he didn't usually talk about affirmations and whatever, but there's something to be said for putting a positive thought form or affirmation out there and following that to eradicate all the negative messages that are coming up from the unconscious mind, because they don't help. The mind just keeps repeating, "I'm no good. I'm no good. I'm not worthy. This fellow's found enlightenment and I haven't." If someone keeps repeating that sort of message, it pushes them further down. So another strategy is give them a positive message. Try and lift them out of the Maya. And once you're out of the Maya, and you've been out of the Maya for some time, then the power of the unconscious messages may well dissolve. I don't know. I know some people have done it this way. Yeah, I mean, I think there's many strategies to. There never is just one way. There's not one teaching. Also, for people who are inquiring, there's not just one teaching, one way of saying it. There are thousands of ways of saying it. Like there's thousands of different kinds of music, ways of making music, different instruments. Even singing, there are dozens and probably hundreds of different ways you can use your voice. One of the things I'm sort of feeling quite strong about at the moment is that this is the message I think that really needs to get out there at the moment, that not to be fixed in only being open to hearing things one way or finding things one way or expressing things one way. There are many languages for this, and some of them don't even involve words. Some of them may involve music or body movement.
Yeah.
Stillness, silence, meditation. So
I mean, non-duality is big, and so is, mentioning depression. Depression's a complex psychological thing too. So that's it's a big topic too.
It's a big topic because the world is run by a lot of depressive people.
Wow.
Leaders of governments, and you think of the effect that people who are depressed or people who are trying to overcome deep-seated psychological problems, and as a result maybe have to assert themselves more, become dictators, abuse people, kill people because they feel so worthless within themselves. I mean, I don't think none of these dictators we know, even the very worst of them, they were not doing it because they were happy people. They were doing it because somewhere inside their psyche there was deep hurt, there was deep confusion, deep unhappiness. So whilst we can sort of vilify them, sort of say Hitler, evil man, Saddam Hussein, evil man, Robert Mugabe, evil man, etc., etc., even these people are not doing it because they're happy. But the whole world is affected by their dysfunction.
So do you think non-duality could be the savior of the world?
Not if it goes under the banner of non-duality, because it'll just become another sect, another cult. In a way, I mean, non-duality is there in all the traditional religions, philosophies. It's there. It's had a sort of an influence throughout the ages, I'm sure. But the moment you sort of call it non-duality or Advaita, and you go out on a mission to kind of convert everyone or to enlighten them or whatever, I think there's a certain amount of ego in that, which is helpful or not. I mean, sometimes it takes someone like that to actually go out and spread the word, to make people aware of things. Sometimes I think maybe even a lot of positive things that have happened in the world have been because of people who have thought they were on a mission and they needed to say something. Otherwise, maybe it's a much slower process. People finding out for themselves, millions of people, billions of people having to find out for themselves without any hints from the past or from people who have forged some sort of clarity. Oh, we're talking big things here.
Yeah, but then you brought it right down to the level of the individual. And so in your own case, I mean, what's your story on the journey to realization?
Well, I don't even say that, to be honest. I don't. When someone says they've had an awakening, or they were enlightened on this date or that date, or they were walking through the park, or they were climbing up a tree, or they were sailing in a boat or whatever, and there was this big awakening. Well, these things happen. I'm sure we all have those, and I can think of a particular time when, in the journey, as it were, it was something that, I don't know. It's more of an opening. I think there are gates that you go through, and suddenly there's a bigger opening. You've gone through the gate. The gate has opened. You walk through. Your vision has sort of expanded a bit more, or a great deal more. Sometimes it's very, very dramatic, I think, for some people. Yeah, I mean, with myself, I suppose my interest in meditation, philosophy, and such like started quite early. I suppose I was 16 or 17 when it started. The place I started to work, just at the end of the road and around the corner, there was a bookshop. And I found myself every lunchtime going to the bookshop, just looking through the books, find out what I liked and whatever. And I found myself in the section with poetry. And one of the early inspirations for me was Khalil Gibran. And I read all of his books, obviously starting with The Prophet, but I read all of his books that were available at the time. I think it was about 17 or 18. Very easy to read, but they were very wise, very poetic and very inspiring. Other books that I sort of came across there were translations of the Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita by Juan Mascaro. I don't know if you know his translations.
No.
No, and I found them, very stimulating. And then I got into the Greek classics, Plato and Aristotle and such like, and I started reading Plato's sort of the dialogues with Socrates and whatever, and I was very inspired by them at the time. But all these sort of things were kind of, waking something up, having sort of gone through a school system and left quite early, the earliest opportunity, in fact, to start work. And to be honest, I think I only really started reading from my own accord once I left school. And then suddenly, you've got all the wisdom of the world is there. And for some reason, I was attracted to it, and a lot of people aren't. They'll find an interest somewhere else, but this is what fired me up. And of course, it was the time. It was the time of the late 1960s and the Vietnam War and whatever. And I was also very inspired by folk music. I wasn't so much into rock music and pop music. It was folk music and sort of singers like Tom Paxton, Gordon Lightfoot, Phil Oakes, Peter, Paul and Mary, these sort of people, Bob Dylan. So they also stimulated like an interest in beauty and they raised questions in their songs, and I think that sort of ran in accord with my sort of reading of Eastern literature and such like. Yeah.
That idea of raising questions seems so just seems to be at the cornerstone of any real, I want to say search, but any real life, really. I'm sure people who don't kind of launch themselves on a spiritual search also have questions, but they may ask different kinds of questions. I'm not sure. When people get involved in, say, music seriously, into learning an instrument really well and playing it and whatever, in a way they have questions, but their questions are like all the questions are, in a way, they're kind of refinements of your personality, of your outlook, of your ability to think, to feel, to receive. I think is very important, and listening is I feel is probably one of the prime things. So when someone gets involved in music, I think they're stimulating not just the musical sensitivities or whatever, they're refining their tactile sense, their ability to feel, to listen, to receive, and then sometimes later that develops into a spiritual awakening or spiritual search. So I've met many people who sort of come at the spiritual angle. I think actually, I'm not a great student of his work or anything, but I think it's no surprise that Rupert Spira, for instance,
shifts from making pots, clay pots. I don't know if he calls them that. They're rather refined. I think the fact that he moves from that and then is able to speak in such a tactile way, he has a great mastery, I think, of the language connected with the feeling sense. And I think that's something that naturally comes from someone who works with pottery, making pottery or possibly gardening. When one talks about non-duality and spiritual teachings and whatever, I think it's very healthy to actually be able to look at things from different angles, to actually understand when you've got someone you're in communication with who's a born-again Christian, for instance, is not to say, well, he's a born-again Christian, therefore he's talking a lot of rubbish or whatever. Listen to him and try to mirror back to him what you feel about what he's saying without being offensive, without creating a barrier. I mean, I usually find when using this approach, when one finds oneself in communication with people with different views and whatever, having that approach opens things up. It opens them up. They're less on the offensive. And having worked for many years with someone like Jean Klein, I know that he is not another non-duality teacher. He reached you on many different levels, and it wasn't from ideas. It was something that stimulated something really, really deep down. And I don't hear it in a lot of voices. I hear it in more voices now than a few years ago within this field. And I feel there's a lot of positive things happening from people who maybe have had a background in the past in Buddhism or Zen, or who are now coming in and writing books and running workshops and talks in the field of non-duality. And what they bring is a lot of perspective, a deep perspective, maybe from years of training in Buddhism. Some maybe have even been monks. And I feel if someone has spent many years sitting, and I'm not advocating that people do or don't, it's what you're drawn to, and some people are drawn to that. But if you have spent many years going through the Buddhist sort of system, which is to a certain extent hierarchical, I feel you become acquainted at a deep level with silence, stillness, what it feels like in a tactile way, what it feels like to walk on a cold floor with bare feet, or to be sitting on your own for days on end in a room or a cell or whatever. And I think people who've done that do have a depth to them beyond the depth that people who are only coming from ideas can reach. That's my feeling. But I mean, I'm not, by saying that, I'm not saying then we should have a hierarchical system, which is what they have in Buddhism and, maybe in Advaita also, where you spend 20 or 30 years to find out you're nobody. It's good to know that right from the beginning. Yeah. This thing about sort of teachers and teachings and whatever, and people traveling around giving teachings, and people talk about different teachers, and I think we actually see, or I say we, the royal we, so to speak, that we put people on a pedestal, teachers or anyone who's good at anything, we put them on a pedestal. But I think a healthier way, I feel, is to actually see them as a unique expression of whatever it is they've come to embody or to understand or to be skillful at, to find their depth in. I mean, I see people like Eckhart Tolle as an equal. I see him, and the same with Jean Klein, even though he's not here. But I did have this feeling before, but it's come out, and I've started expressing this more lately to people, that it's not helpful to put someone on a pedestal. You see someone, Eckhart Tolle has a big following, Adyashanti has a big following. People still do put these people on a pedestal, and I think it's better to see them more as a kind of artist, as someone who is expressing something in a unique way. And everyone expresses, all of these people express themselves in a unique way. They have unique personal qualities. And you can say, well, there's nobody here, personality is irrelevant. But it's not. In the expression of what they have to say, they are kind of expressing it, if you like, a vessel that has been primed in a certain way through the course of their life. And when we see people in that way, who apparently seem to be teachers or writers or whatever, we listen to them in a different way. We listen with a different quality, and I think the quality of listening is important. We see the beauty in them instead of comparing one with the other and saying, you know, he says this and he says that, and which one is right, you know, because they seem to be contradicting each other. Rather than that, I think to actually say, well, look, yeah, this guy's, he's playing his instrument in a unique way, and I'll listen to that instrument because he's a master at, you know, playing his instrument. And the other guy plays a different instrument. It's the vessel that's been primed through his life, and the things he's learned, the way he's learned how to articulate himself, and some articulate themselves better than others. And if people are sort of striving for enlightenment or anything like that, first of all, they're not going to find it, because the actual striving after it is a barrier to it anyway. To actually see that the teacher is an equal, but not an equal in the sense that, you know, oh, well, he's equal, so he's got nothing to offer me. But he's equal, but he's become a master at expressing himself in a certain way. He's found a certain depth within his body, literally within his body, that he can speak from and he can write from. There's a lot to be learned from everyone. And it's a bit like, I think, being a musician. I mean, myself, you know, I write, and, you know, you could say, well, I've realized something or other in my life, but it doesn't stop me from reading others, you know, in the same way a musician doesn't stop buying music because he can play an instrument. So I think we should always be open and listening and finding new ways of expressing ourselves. And sometimes we may understand something very deeply, but then we come across someone who can actually express it in a better way than we've hitherto found. So I think there's always room for learning in all directions, and that's a message I'm sort of sharing a lot at the moment.
It's an important message, this whole idea of seeing people not as the same. Obviously, we're all different.
Sure.
But still equals.
I mean,
in another sense, perhaps in the sense that we can all be self-realized, you know.
Sure.
But we're not going to express that in the same. We're not going to all be Adyashanti. I mean, let's face it.
No doubt not. But we might be. We will be what we are.
Yeah.
The only thing is we have to find what we are and how to express what we are with the potential that's inside us for for us to express ourselves. And it may be, as a bricklayer. It may be as a plumber, it may be as a writer, it may be as an accountant, it may be as anything, but if we are able to actually find that authenticity within ourselves, to find our original voice such that we can, whatever we do, we share from that depth. That depth reaches parts in other people who are listening and interacting with us in such a way that they are also take something from that interaction that may be a mirror for their own awakening.
You're talking about the depth, and as some people who are teachers, communicators, have touched a great depth in their body. Now, Jean Klein taught yoga, didn't he? So he was a body-oriented teacher himself. Yeah. And did you get much out of that, or what was your relationship with that?
Yes, because the key thing to his, he called it yoga sort of come body work, because he didn't stick fixedly to the traditional yoga asanas. It was more kind of stretching, bending, sometimes in traditional asanas, other times not, modifications of the traditional postures. The key element that was emphasized was, first of all, slowness, feeling every movement, every extension, every stretch, feeling it deep down, and not just kind of jumping the gap, as it were. If you move your arm and you move it fast, what's happened, between where it started off and where it finishes. What was happening, and there was unconsciousness in that space where it moved from A to B quickly. You move slowly and feel what it's like to move your hand. What is the sensation, the tactile feeling in the body?
What can you get from that?
I don't know whether you get anything, but what it does is it takes you deeper into feeling things. I think feeling things, situations in your life. When you're sort of presented with several directions you can go in, for instance, instead of making a mental decision necessarily, there's another faculty that comes into play, and that is on more of a feeling level. You feel, well, if I go that way, your head is still working, but it's working in conjunction with feeling, and I think it's on that level of feeling that there's, I think, is closer to clear seeing, direct seeing into the true nature of things. When you're actually experiencing life in the feeling, in that sense, in the body, there's a more direct relationship with what actually is there. Try feeling and listening to interactions with people. Try feeling and listening to your own reactions. Feel where they come from. It can be a very liberating thing to go into your feeling. And I don't mean feelings here. I don't mean feelings, emotions, feeling inadequate or feeling angry or anything like that. But no, deeper than that. They're really into ground of your being. It's tactile. You can feel it when you're grounded. I think in your true being, your true nature. The body feels it. The person, the memory, gets seated in the memory. It's there, but it's a place that isn't just residing in memory. It's a place where you connect with, I think, what you could call your soul or your true nature. Having said that, it's also good not to get fixed on that and make it into a concept and project that idea. It's something to explore, I feel, and not to make too much of it as a technique or anything. Yeah.
That's always a danger, the great amazing hazard of anything, but especially non-duality.
Sure.
Where the whole idea is non-conceptuality, and anything can be made into an object.
Oh, I've had people on forums being very abusive to me because I have the affront to sort of question them on their sort of pet concepts. It doesn't happen so much now, but it did a few years back. And using four-letter words and whatever because they couldn't accept being questioned.
What forums do you write on now, currently?
There's one that actually is run by a chap here in Totnes, which is a very popular forum, called I Am, and that's on Facebook. The one that I run is called Open Awareness Forum, and it's on it's on Yahoo. And of course, Open Awareness is part of the title of my latest sort of free downloadable book called Living in Open Awareness.
Yeah, and that's different from Texture of Being.
I set it out in a kind of poetic form, not so much because I wanted it to look like a poem or anything, but because the fewer words you can write a book in, the better. Basically wanted to slow down the reading experience so that people can actually have some space in the thinking process. And so people maybe are going to feel what they read more than just it fizzing through their mind very quickly as they go from one idea to another.
The nice thing about the book is that you hit a lot of the main themes of these non-dual teachings, and you really summarize them and address them and present them in a way that's so simple, so clear. Your book's almost like a small encyclopedia, because anyone, if you're a teacher, if you're a student, if you're a journalist, you're just researching non-duality, you're not on any kind of spiritual search. Doesn't matter, what your relationship to these teachings is. You can sort of pick a topic from your book, and you address it in a way that just puts it all in a nugget. It's just really nice, and it becomes like a reference work. It's like, geez, I'm going to a meeting, and they're going to be talking about this or that. I need a quick brush up. They can just go to your book and hit the topic.
Everything that is written there came spontaneously. It's not something I wrote and then rewrote. There's very little adjustments, and most of the adjustments were only spelling adjustments. It's as it came out, and I think that also adds a certain authenticity to it. If only it's a reminder to someone, if they maybe need to remind themselves on something like that to stimulate their own processes, then it's a great thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you're a very clean writer. You really are. And it's very open. You don't really recommend any specific things to anybody, except you do mention your wife's teachings, I guess, here
Yes.
at some point.
Well, her teacher, movement teachers.
Her teacher.
Yes, that's right.
That's where I recognized it.
Yeah, I think working with Prapto was interesting, really, because I sort of came to his way of working, 10, 11, 12 years ago or so. And at first I couldn't quite work him out because he didn't talk very much then. He'd have a group of people who would come in, it might be 10, it might be 20, it might be half a dozen, it may be 30 people or more, They come into a hall and they just start moving, and he kind of sits there and he does nothing, he just lets them kind of warm up and whatever, and they all have different ways of moving and expressing themselves, and some have maybe just woken up an hour or so earlier, so they're kind of yawning, and he just sort of hangs around, and he's just kind of, I feel like he sort of listens, and he just waits, and he uses music, he uses movement, he uses playing a drum. Whatever comes up, I'm pretty sure most of what comes up for him isn't rehearsed. He has the ability to be in the moment, to respond to the moment with total flexibility of body or of response to whatever is happening. It could be verbal, it could be physical, a physical movement, it could be singing. For instance, one of the things he would do is, he'll take someone into a hall, into the middle of the room, with people sitting around just witnessing. She's understood to be witnessing without any judgment. And so people understand this. So they just witness, they observe, and they listen to what's happening. They feel what's happening. Sometimes the person who's with him and interacting in movement, spontaneous movement, this is, ad-libbed movement, they will maybe feel a bit sort of coy, a bit shy or something with all the people around. So he might mirror how they're behaving. He might encourage them to open out their movement, their body, to move quicker or to move. He might take their hand and take them to a part of the room, and just to show them the resistance they have to being taken there. All this is happening non-verbally, and many other tricks besides that. I sort of observed this chap, and I realized that he is actually coming totally from the moment, from not knowing, and he doesn't use words to teach this. He can teach it just through movement.
This person, Suprapto Suryodharma, you say open awareness meditation, which you teach in the beginning of the book, is a perfect tool for doing this, for seeing how our mind is working. And
yes.
And then you say, as our practices such as Amerta Movement, as initiated by Suprapto Suryodharma. You don't recommend it. You don't give a website for it. You just you give it a plug, basically. You give it a light plug. You don't do that with anything else. You don't really plug anything else. No person, no method, nothing.
No, that's right.
No, there's no Jean Klein in it.
No. I mean, I don't feel the need to actually quote people because I can say it myself.
You don't quote anyone, like I said.
No, that's right. But with Prapto, I do, because it's something different. I think it's something that people who, because the non-duality thing can become very much an intellectual head thing for a lot of people. I'm sure that is the barrier, and I think for people who think too much about it, they should probably, I mean, I say should, but it would be in their interests to explore other modes of being or operating. It could be something like Suprapto offers, or it could be, it could be Tai Chi, or there are many different types of movement teaching. Yeah, I think if you're trapped in your head, body work is very helpful. Body work of some kind, moving. It could be jogging, it could be Zen jogging. Or there is a tendency, if your only contact with something like non-duality is through intellect on the internet, and many people are there all day long, or following a particular teacher around and listening over and over again, and repeating what they say. And it's good to get out of that and do something physical as a kind of counterbalance. That also helps with taking you to a deeper level. I think even swimming, if you go swimming or sailing or something physical, or having a massage every week, or shiatsu, or when your ideas get locked up and you get fixed in the feeling that you're inadequate, or these people seem to be awakened or enlightened and I'm not. It sort of like seats it in your head more, and it becomes more fixated. And I think you, at that point, not only fixated in the head, but it will also have repercussions throughout the body, because our sort of emotions, deep-seated emotions and whatever, do affect various organs and parts of the body. They may make us have more of a tendency towards arthritis or something, or heart disease, or approaching it on a physical level, loosening up the body and the mind through physical activity, physical exploration. It can't do any harm. It can only be helpful. Mm. And it may well actually release a lot of kind of fixed stuff in seekers who feel they haven't quite got it or haven't quite arrived. I don't think there's any better than Prapto. The unfortunate thing is that he's pretty much retiring now. So, anyone who wants to work with him will have to go to Indonesia to work. But it would be I'm sure it would be a trip well worthwhile for anyone who has that sort of inclination.
Yeah, people can go to like Wikipedia and find out more about Amerta Movement, Amerta.
Yeah, Amerta, that's right, yeah. Or, YouTube, there's a couple of videos that sort of show his work. The teachers that I was sort of particularly seeking with, they've either passed on or whatever, so the new generation are people who are my contemporaries, so I don't seek from them. I do read some of them, and I'm sure I learn better ways of expressing through that, and I see what I also, through reading some of the questions that are put to some of the teachers, now I sort of see what kind of problems people feel now, and I don't know that they're always the same questions that people used to ask in the days of Jean Klein. Yeah, I think because non-duality teachings are much more kind of available.
Well, people
very quickly people have got an idea of what's what. They've got an idea of all the concepts behind non-duality. It's very simple for people to understand on that level, but taking it any further, I think when people see a teacher as having awakened, they use this term awakening now, they feel like it hasn't happened to them. The focus has changed. When I was seeking, for instance, and probably when you were seeking, I was seeking because I just wanted to, I was like the bee looking for the nectar. It wasn't because I was suffering and confused inside. It was because I just wanted greater clarity, and I was just naturally pulled to it. I was the bee flying towards the flower, to find the nectar, simply because that's what my whole thing was to do, not because I was looking for enlightenment. In the sense that enlightenment is an end product, a goal that you aim for. But I feel what I notice in quite a lot of questions put to some of the teachers is that some people have this goal of awakening, enlightenment. Somehow that sort of has been rooted in their thinking that they must have this. And so it's become like anything else that you seek, be it money or pleasure or whatever. It's like it's an acquisition. And because it's an acquisition, but unlike other things, you can't just go out and buy it. You have to work your way to it happening in some way. It doesn't happen because the very act of sort of having it as a goal is its own negation. So long and until you let go of that idea of gaining something at the end of a journey, then you can't come.
It's an honor to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Jerry, and wishing you well. Yeah.
You too, Ray.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.